Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the rise, the absolute reign, and the modern-day challenge of the US dollar. You hear about it every single day on the financial news, but the story of exactly how one single currency came to completely dominate the globe is a genuinely fascinating sequence of strategic, geopolitical events. Let's get right into it.
So let's start by asking a question that literally affects everything, from global trade all the way down to the money in our wallets. Why is it that whenever nations count their foreign exchange reserves, the benchmark is almost always the US dollar? I mean, why not the euro? Why not the yen or the yuan? What actually gives the dollar this unique, gravity-defying power over the entire global economy? To really get this, the source material uses this brilliant analogy. Picture two cats just viciously fighting each other, and a monkey sitting up in a tree, just watching and opportunistically grabbing the spoils. The fighting cats represent the powerful nations of Europe locked in a brutal conflict, while the monkey represents a strategically positioned America, patiently sitting on the sidelines and profiting immensely by selling much-needed supplies to those fighting felines. Let's put some dates to that analogy. 1914, World War I kicks off. Then 1939, World War II begins. During both of these massive conflicts, Europe's industries practically came to a dead stop. They weren't making consumer goods, they were fighting for absolute survival. But over in America, the factories were absolutely humming. The US positioned itself as the global supplier of weapons, food, you name it, only actually entering the conflicts toward the very end, long after the bulk of the fighting and the selling was already done. But here is the kicker. America wasn't about to accept ruined, inflated European currencies for all of those supplies. No way. They demanded payment in physical gold. So as these wars dragged on, year after year, gold just steadily poured across the Atlantic. Through this immense transfer of wealth, the US quietly scooped up a staggering 60 to 70% of the entire world's gold supply. That is just a mind-blowing amount of wealth. Fast forward to the end of the Second World War in 1944. Look at the stark contrast here. On one side, you've got Europe in total economic ruin, devastated industries, heavy debts, and basically empty vaults. And on the other side, a booming US economy with untouched factories and vaults overflowing with the vast majority of the world's wealth. Europe desperately needed to trade to rebuild, but they had absolutely no stable currency to do it with. This brings us to a massive turning point, July 1, 1944. Delegates from 44 different countries meet up at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They had to figure out a reliable way to restart the global economic engine. And since America unequivocally held all the cards and all the gold, these 44 nations agreed to trust the US dollar as the central global reserve currency. From then on, international trade would be conducted in dollars rather than their own wildly unpredictable money. But you can't just demand trust on that scale. You have to guarantee it. Enter the gold standard. To build this trust, the US made a hard, internationally binding promise. 1 ounce of gold would be permanently fixed at a value of $35. They essentially swore they'd only print as many dollars as they had the physical gold in their vaults to back up. Holding a dollar was supposed to be exactly as secure as holding physical gold. And for quite some time, that worked perfectly. But eventually, a quiet suspicion started spreading among the international community. Countries began thinking, hey, is America running its printing presses a little too hot? Are they secretly printing unbacked dollars to fund their own growth? So, what do you do when you suspect the books are cooked? You ask for a transparent audit. Several countries formally demanded an audit of the US Federal Reserve to verify the gold actually matched the dollars. And the US response? An outright refusal. Well, that tension had to break, and boy did it ever. In August 1971, we get a massive plot twist. President Richard Nixon goes on national television and shocks the global financial system. He announces that the United States would completely decouple the dollar from gold. Overnight, the gold standard was dead. Other nations were suddenly left holding millions of paper dollars that they couldn't exchange back for guaranteed gold. Think about the incredible implications of that moment. With the gold backing totally gone, you have to wonder, how on earth did the US prevent the dollar from instantly losing its value on the world stage? By all traditional economic logic, nations should have just dumped their dollars and walked away. So how did the currency survive and maintain its absolute global power? The answer is a truly brilliant geopolitical pivot. The US government approached the oil-rich nations of the Middle East and struck a historic deal. The agreement was simple. The US provides absolute military protection for Middle Eastern oil fields, ensuring those ruling powers stay secure. In return, those nations agreed to sell their oil strictly and exclusively in US dollars. And since literally every country on Earth needs oil to keep their economies running, the entire world was suddenly forced to continuously acquire US dollars.
This strategic move gave birth to what we call the petrodollar system. Let's break down exactly what that means. If a country like India wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they can't just pay with their own Indian rupees. First, they have to convert their wealth to buy US dollars and then use those dollars to buy the oil. This created an artificial but highly effective, permanent worldwide demand for the American currency. It completely cemented its supremacy long after the gold standard vanished. Now, according strictly to our sources' analysis, keeping this system intact became a matter of primary global security for the U.S. The source highlights that the U.S. fiercely protected this petrodollar monopoly. It notes that when leaders like Saddam Hussein in Iraq attempted to sell oil in other currencies, or when Muammar Gaddafi in Libya pushed back against dollar dependence, both of those nations soon faced U.S. military invasions. The overarching message from the source material is that participation in this system was aggressively maintained. But today, that geopolitical landscape is rapidly shifting. We're seeing major economies waking up and actively building alternative systems. The Russian ruble is being heavily pushed for regional trade. China is actively and aggressively attempting to position the yuan as a direct challenger to dollar dominance. And even India is establishing brand new bilateral trade agreements using the Indian rupee to completely bypass the dollar in certain international transactions. Decades ago, if a single nation challenged the dollar, they were isolated. But today, multiple major economies are doing it at the exact same time. The global dynamics have fundamentally changed. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. As major global economic powers unite to assert their own financial independence, are we currently witnessing the final chapter of the dollar's unprecedented global reign? Keep a close eye on the markets, because this history is quite literally being written right now. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.